homeowners have lost trees in the landscape over the past few years due to drought. And when the trees die, we cut them down and we're left with a stump to manage. Now there's a lot of things we can do with this stump. The simplest is to be just let it sit there and decay naturally over time. Some people don't like the look of stumps and they want to get them out of the landscape, and our two main options for doing that are stump grinding or applying a chemical to hasten decomposition. Now, of course, these vary in cost, but also in how quickly and how thoroughly they remove the stump. So before we decide on a method, we want to take a look at the stump's surroundings, and that might guide us in one direction or the other. For one thing, with a stump grinder, you have to be able to access the stump. So if it's in the middle of a very ornate bed, it might not be accessible to equipment. The other thing is some trees are clonal, meaning that multiple trunks come up out of the same root system. Or trees that are very close together, oftentimes the roots graft together. And it's my suspicion that that might be the case here with these pecans, and I'd be worried about applying chemical to this stump because that could negatively affect or even kill the living tree. So in this situation, I would either grind down the stump or just let it decay naturally over time. Now, when it comes to stump grinding, you could do it yourself or you could hire a professional. It's a little more costly to hire a professional, but remember that removing a stump by yourself takes many hours to grind it down. It typically takes a homeowner about 3 hours to do the job that it takes a professional 1 hour. So you might consider that in your cost savings. And also the equipment available to rent from your local stores can only handle smaller trees. So the size of the tree might also dictate whether you do the job yourself or hire a professional. But I want you to see how thoroughly a stump can be removed by grinding, so let's take a look at a site where we had one removed. We had a large pecan tree growing in this site that was damaged by a storm and had to be removed. And we did professional stump grinding on this tree, and you could see that there's very little evidence that it was ever here. So this creates a nice visual landscape. Now underground, in the central area, this is thoroughly ground out, but remember, a large tree is going to have large roots extending out, so you might run into those when you go digging in the area around the tree. Now for a smaller job, you can do this yourself, and we have a redbud that's a nice example of that. But for a larger tree, you're going to want to hire a professional. And then some small trees that die out without ever really becoming established, they're not going to have a very large, extensive root system. And these can be removed by simply digging it out. And then we don't really leave any roots in the ground, and we have a nice fresh spot to try again. Of course, there's several chemical products that we can use to work on the stump by decaying it. These typically contain potassium nitrate, and they hasten the decay of that stump. However, they're not going to completely remove the stump very quickly, so you're still going to have visually a stump left in the landscape, at least for a while the decay process occurs. To hasten this, we typically apply it by drilling holes into that stump, and we apply our chemical into the holes. This allows it to get down further and work more thoroughly inside the stump. Of course, it's not necessary to remove tree stumps from the landscape. They're a very natural part of the forest community, and they can work to host insects and a variety of wildlife, so they're really doing no harm. The reason most people remove them is aesthetic, but I've also seen some very clever gardeners put those stumps to work by creating a natural planter out of the stump or incorporating it into some type of bird bath. So there's many options we can use. We definitely want to weigh the costs as well as the environmental impact when we're selecting a method to manage our tree stumps.